And so welcome everybody. We're here at the Greater Essex County District School Board. It's 451 Park Street, one of our favorite destinations. Kind of not really, but we thank you all for coming. And so we're gonna have a prayer walk starting now, and then 5 o'clock we're gonna go inside and actually appreciate everybody going in and being part of the gallery because they need to have eyes on them. Realize that the public is watching, the public that they are accountable to. No, they don't want to be or acknowledge that they are. They are 100% accountable to us. And one thing to notice is like who actually is showing up in that gallery. It's us. Once in a while, they may recruit one or two from the Pride community, but really, we're the ones showing up saying we don't want this. So the voice is opposing what they're doing, this RAD 65 and all the rest of it, the gender expression and gender identity in schools, a regulation, which again, just so everybody's clear, in 2021, that was the policy, the regulation that we were really opposing originally, saying that it said to basically keep secrets from parents no matter the age of the child. So if they want to change their pronouns, their name, their gender, everybody in the school could know, and the child could be getting bullied for that matter. But then when the child goes home, the parents might not know and wonder why the child is so frustrated and upset. But somehow, some way, they think that they have a greater role in the life of the child than the parents. So we're here to try to set them straight on that. Beth will be speaking, Selena will be speaking, and somehow I'll be speaking also tonight. You know, miracles happen. So, but we're all going to be speaking. But now in 2025, they've taken that secret keeping regulation and they've extended it in a real nasty, sinister way to include the gender mixed gender spaces and mixed gender sports. And we're clearly against that because we know that that's not safe. It risks harm, especially to males being in female spaces. But also in sports, you know, there's both physical and sexual threats and risks of harm to these kids. And we've told them they don't acknowledge it, but we're here to remind them again at the committee level. So this is the policy and bylaw committee meeting that they'll be at 5 o'clock that we'll be going into. Prior to that, we're doing this prayer walk because we all know that we battle not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual, the spiritualities and the dark forces of this dark world. Paraphrasing, forgive me. But also in Luke 18:16 it says, "But Jesus called them to him, saying, 'Let the children come to me, and do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God.'" They are hindering children from understanding who they actually are, who their identity is. Now, if you want to actually have a pride school, go have a pride school. But this is a public school acting like a private school. Amen. Doing special interests. That's the Canadian flag. That's all the inclusivity they need. You know, but they choose to be discriminating, excluding, and indoctrinating. That's the true DEI that's happening inside these walls. And along with critical race theory, telling children born in the wrong body, and definitely alienating people of faith. And they hate hearing that, but it's the truth. And so we're here to remind them, try to sway them somehow, some way. This regulation actually, again, another miracle, was actually sent back to committee. So it was this regulation, our AD 65, was put before the board of the whole, the committee of the whole, I guess, as you would put it. So this is the policy bylaw committee that is reviewing it. They put it back before the board. Then a trustee, Malik, actually said, we should tighten this up. So whether he's for or against, we're not exactly sure. Either way, there was enough there that they actually chose to send it back to committee, and that's why it's here today, and that's why we're actually going to speak again. So it's a good thing. We can speak to it, and you all being here is very important to it. And the three of us having an opportunity to speak is very important because it's on public record. And we've been there before with public record. I'm not sure that they really care about the public record, but it's there and they are accountable to us, and we have a lot to share with them today. So hopefully that will all go well. But really what we're doing right now is the prayer walk. So the prayer walk, the actual route will be just down this alley, and then you go to the street at the end, take a left, and then you get to the alley, take a left, and you come back down right here, back up on the sidewalk, and then we'll come back here. And you can do a few laps, however fast you walk, however slow you walk.
This regulation was put out for public consultation in February.
Yes.
Right? And they allowed for 2 weeks, whereas the public could go online and submit their responses. And then they closed it, and then the committee decided that they barely edited the regulation at all. In fact, all they did is make it a little worse by extending these new privileges to overnight field trips. That means that they could go camping, and there's a boy in the girls' cabin for some reason. So So we actually initiated a freedom of information request, right?
Yes. Yeah. So good reminder. I was going to get to it. Maybe. Teamwork, extreme work. But yeah, so we actually, there's 400 responses that we are waiting on. And so, because we want to see, we're like, that's public information. And so we put in the request and you have to pay for it and all this. And then, like, okay, that's fine. But why are you not sharing this with the public? Because the public provided the consultation. We went to your portal, entered in our feedback. We're interested in knowing what has the community said on this. And they have not disclosed that information to us. And so it actually took a formal FOI to request. Loud pipe save lives. So, but so we are waiting on those responses. We want to go through all 400 and actually see what is the split there. For, against, neutral. I don't care, but I know people are neutral on it. If they actually went to the portal and actually put in a response. We expect that there's not a whole lot of support in those responses, and what we've seen is that there isn't a whole lot of support. So, yes, like as Selena said, we're waiting on that. We have to get it soon. And we just want to share the information. If you're so confident in what you're doing, then why aren't you sharing the public consultation feedback? This is things that we've spoken on. It's in the Education Act, the Good Governance Guide. They're supposed to actually be transparent with the public, but they're not being that. So, go goodbye. A little bit better than the Rainbow Vikings. It was, I guess we found it. There is an actual site, a link, and if you go to that link, it will change whatever regulation is up for review. It'll cycle through, but I don't know, we found the link and started distributing the link around. And I'm sure the school board made it public to whatever extent, but I think you had to go kind of find it. I don't know if anybody ever received an email, but from what I can tell, somebody found the link. And then we started distributing the link.
So the 400 responses, like, you or?
No. There were letters written that actually, maybe Selena, if you want to talk to, that went through it was a formal response in a sense, you might say, right? Yeah.
Okay, well, we went national with it. Our head office in British Columbia put a national alert out to all Action for Canada members. And
Oh,
sorry.
leave.
And so what happened is all the national members of Action for Canada submitted their emails directly to the trustees' emails. Now, whether or not that was included into what the committee took to heart for their regulation modifications, not necessarily. Our freedom of information request is for the portal responses only. After that, we can introduce a new freedom of information request for the emails, which we intend to do because we know that some of our church friends sent emails.
Yeah. And so we're waiting on those responses, and we will definitely, we can make that public to people what the responses are. We'll go through them. But the crazy thing is that we know that Claire Howard, she's the superintendent of education. I think the roles changed recently, but either way, they have gone through that feedback. They have commented to it sort of subjectively and vaguely saying, well, it's kind of not so much. We're cool with what we're doing. It was just very whitewashed, and we're saying, give us the numbers. Like, give us the hard numbers as to whether or not this is being supported or not in the community. And again, we don't believe that it is. So we'll get those responses and have a look at them. But yeah, I put in a Facebook post today was, we've been through a lot of things federally, provincially, but people don't realize what's happening in their own backyard. Yeah. We're all so distracted, but municipally, we are off the rails. We are in the gutter, and these kids need to be protected from people like this who think that their role as trustees is to actually scramble their brains. And then when that happens, who's there to pick up the pieces? It's not them. It's the parents. It's the community. It's the churches. The ones who actually understand what it means to protect the innocence of a child. So, but we are here for the prayer walk, and Selena made some nice handouts here So this is regarding regulation R8065. You can see that reference on the front. And then we're talking about student changes to name, gender, and pronouns. That's a secret keeping. But then the males, primarily the concern being males in female washrooms, in female change rooms, and female sports. And this is for all ages K to 12. So the secret keeping doesn't matter the age of the child. And then principals and teachers keeping secrets from parents. I mean, that's obviously something that we've mentioned a few times. So yeah, we're going to go through for the prayer walk. We can start with a prayer, and then you guys can go off in groups individually, however you want to do it, however you roll. And the idea is to pray, and we're just going to peacefully walk around the building. People call it a Jericho walk. And we need, what's that? Yes. Yeah, we're going to kick it off with the prayer. So, Lord, Father, thank you for gathering us here today. Thank you for how you have called out your people, and we thank you for this opportunity to stand for parents, for kids, and for the teachers and the staff too, who don't want to be faced with compelled speech and being told that their conscience, their beliefs, their expressions, and their religions are wrong. And so we pray that you'd help us to be articulate today in the speeches, to be fervent in our prayers, to be effective as your ambassadors, and that you would help us to be in your will, to be loving in what we say and gracious, but also to be that salt and light that's needed in this dark place. And so we know that there are people up there who do align with us or are thinking to align with us in some way. I believe their consciences are pricked, but we do pray that you would take that even further, and that we would have this regulation repealed, recalled, in all honesty, trash, shredded, and burned. And so we pray that you'd help us to just have enjoy the time together, really, and the process, because this is a good thing we're doing. And we thank you for how you give us the strength to do this, to accomplish it. And we pray that you would be with us here outside the building, and then when we go inside, and that your will be done. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
So should we put the water on the top?
Just right here. Grab a water if you need it. We tend to go in twos. If you don't have a partner or a buddy that you brought, grab somebody. And then you can just pray off of the sheet that you're given. If you don't know what you already want to say, just take turns praying out loud to God, right? He will put his hand on this evening. He will fill the room, right? He will change things because he already has. Right?
Speakers, we got to be back in a half hour.
If you want to sign, we bring signs just so we label ourselves. We don't want to give anybody an opportunity to label us, to call us haters and bigots and say that we're anti-LGBTQ. We're not here about anti-LGBTQ. We're here to protect the kids. So that's why we carry signs.
Right.
So they can't say we're doing something that we're not. Like this one.
Let's see what plastic one. I don't know if I have I'll be holding the sign since. Well, man,
Why don't you say hi to the audience?
hello audience, this is the other half of the Truth Trumpet. It's been a while, but as you know, we're always in the back burner doing things, and part of this it's not just politics. This is entrenched in politics as well, but the school board and our children have always been a top priority in what we do, and we're never going to relinquish. This is our future, even if they're not our children, which they are. But even if they weren't our children, they are the future police, emergency workers, teachers, and just the future of our nation. And we need our nation to go forward into a prosperous area using the information we've always known and built off of science, not this crazy pseudoscience Marxist communist ideology that's plaguing and infecting our school board system, at least the public and Catholic school board. There are some good private schools out there. We'll talk about that later. But for now, let's pray and think about the children, the faculty and staff, and have their hardened hearts changed and softened so they can see the damage that they have done and that they are currently doing to a lot of these children. Even if you don't agree with our perspective, there is so much time spent on this DEI and cancel culture curriculum that it's taking over at, let's say, 20% 20% of the time that your children should be learning critical things, not race theory, but critical things that will help them in their development and throughout their adult life, skills. And many of those aren't even in the school system program anymore. Civics should be taught across the board. Economics, there's a reason why Canadians don't manage their money, the little that they have, thanks to government Canada. But the little that they have, it's difficult to manage because people, when they feel deflated, defeated, whether they know it or not, they spend more money on luxuries of the flesh that are fleeting happiness. And with fleeting happiness, you're always seeking out to attain it back. And a lot of the times people spend more money to do so, money they don't have. So that's all stems from our education system with the little ones. We need to think about the future, but we also need to go back in time and utilize some of the great tactics and educational systems that we implemented so long ago that built, maybe not necessarily these particular homes in the downtown core, but the homes, the air conditioning, everything that made this nation great is off the backbone of the educated folks of the past.
Just being careful and, diligent.
Where none of these curriculums were at all introduced, nor was this ideology even a concept in the glimmer of anybody's eye back then. As we all know, I think, gender is a construct that was made up, I believe, in the 70s, the 1970s, by a socialist Marxist psychologist, funded, of course, by the US government. And hand in hand, our governments have many systems that work together, and we've utilized and incorporated these same tactics over time. But there was always two sexes. That wasn't an argument. It wasn't even a debate. But when people want to divide, or when agencies want to divide the people and not have us unite, they pick us apart by finding new ways for us to bicker with each other. And they also play on people's psychology or psychosis in their own minds of the inadequacies that we all think individually that we have. So if some young person is having a hard time in school, they're being bullied, or they just have low self-esteem. That's always existed as far as I know, in my generation and in generations past. But part of growing up is learning how to exist in the world in your own skin and develop not just a backbone, but to develop your faith, your spirituality in your faith, develop your cardiovascular system as you grow, and to get confidence through achieving goals and tasks that we set out in life.
Go down to the corner if you want. It's up to you guys. If you want to go to the corner because it's a little smoother, that's fine.
When someone's not feeling comfortable in their skin, and instead of them finding their way through family, through friendships, through love of the community, now they have the system, counselors at school, teachers that say, little Timmy, did you ever consider that you were, and they spin the Rolodex dial of whatever genders they've taught. And of course, little Timmy has never heard of that, says, well, what do you mean? And a whole Pandora's box of opportunities seem to open up for people who identify in these categories that are heavily funded through the DEI programs. So little Timmy comes in the next day with the information provided by their educators, who, by the way, tell the children and through their own policies don't have to share this type of information with parents, pronouns which they teach. So if the kid decides that they want to identify as something else or someone else, the teachers and the faculty and the staff and the policy itself of the school board has put it in place where, for the children's safety, the parents don't have to know. You can keep these secrets. Then they build and build and build upon this ideology that they've created, that they've indoctrinated into the child without you knowing, parents. And then one day your child comes home a month, 2 months, 5 months later, and they have an entire ideological system set up in their mind of what they want to do. They've thought about it, and it's never too late, but it's a difficult road, parents, that you're going to have to go against, because you're going to hear it for the first time, and they've been practicing this with indoctrination that they call education, and they will put above you as the parent's authority. So we want you parents out there that think this isn't happening because you don't hear about it. You would know, right? If there was a boy in the girls' locker room, and then you have some teacher or parent says, I would know if that was happening, and my kid isn't saying it's happening, but your child doesn't want to argue, right? Most kids, most young people, most people don't want to have conflict with other people. So if the teacher and everybody is setting the playing field that Timmy is now Jeanette, then the rest of the class isn't going to focus on it. They're indoctrinated as well. They don't want to dislike Timmy in any way, which is good. But then when mommy asks, hey, are there any boys in the girls' change room? And your daughter says, no, we have Susie, Stephanie, Jeanette, and name others, but Jeanette is actually a boy. But they are in the make-believe land of calling Timmy Jeanette. So the mom or dad or other parents have no clue that it's going on. And of course, it doesn't mean it's happening in every classroom, in every school yet, but it's happening, and policy is always across the board. That's the point of policy, right? So it's linear. So each entity, each school within that system can draw up the policy and just function off of that. They don't have to think, use critical thinking. They don't have to deviate. They just look at what the policy is, blindly follow it. So when your children aren't telling you, a lot of them don't know. A lot of them aren't paying attention to it, because if they don't have the low self-esteem issues, then they're not going to be paying attention to that sort of thing. They'll be off playing kickball with their friends and not listening to all of this indoctrination. But there are many kids that do. A lot of kids don't feel comfortable in their own skin, especially when nowadays you have the system saying, if you are a certain way, say a straight white male, if you have autism, if you have a learning disability, they, instead of locate the root of the issue, address the root cause, and help in the areas that are actually needed to uplift the child and give them self-esteem that they can carry on for the rest of their life, they guide them towards these avenues that will possibly make them have the illusion of happiness for a couple minutes because people are paying attention to them now. They're not being made fun of. But then they're going to enter the real world. And the real world doesn't work that way, even though they're trying to push all of this throughout the entire nation in the corporate world.
I think we got time for one.
But it can't sustain itself. You can choose people based off of the color of their skin or their sexual orientation or what they do in the bedroom. You're not going to get the best product, the quality of product, and what someone is creating. It degrades everything. And that's why, as a nation, we see a degradation of almost everything we produce, supply, or do. Our children are kept indoors mostly. They're playing video games. We need to get back to the education system that we used to have, with, of course, improvements. But there's no need to infect innocent young ones' minds with concepts of sexuality that they weren't even thinking about. The majority of children across the world don't think about sexualized things until they're older or until it's introduced nefariously. And unfortunately now, the nefarious ones aren't necessarily the predators trying to peep in someone's window. It's our own educational system and the government that is backing it financially and through their media corporations. So we're here to pray, as we stated. We're here to pray for the hearts and minds of parents because more parents need to be involved. More parents need to be aware that even though it seems so ridiculous, so deplorable that what we're saying can't possibly be going on. I mean, your kids come home and they're smiling. They go and they have fun. There's no problem today. But like many things, you catch a virus, your child plays at the park, and they rub the bar of some other child that was sick. And the problem, they don't come home an hour later and they're sick. It metastasizes. It takes 2-3 days. And you have no idea. The next day they're playful, they're cheerful. You don't know that they touched something at the park. So just because your child comes home happy and you think none of this stuff is happening at school, understand that it's metastasizing in them. All this information that's being indoctrinated day after day after day. Pride Month, Pride Week, Pride Bonus Month, right? It's constant. It's all the time. I see the advertisements. Drag Queen Story Hour. Drag Queen Circus Act Story Hour. I mean, it's never ending. And you and I are funding this. And if that's the case, we should have a say. We should be able to have an open discussion and decide as a city, as a nation, if we want to intentionally fall into Sodom and Gomorrah and welcome what comes of that, or to repent for our paying attention to other distractions like football more than the education of our children. If that makes sense to you, because it sure makes sense to me. So now let's take a moment and actually think intentional thoughts of prayers for us, the one and true living God. And if you're not currently aware of who that is, and it's not jiving with you or vibing with you, then pray to whoever it is you pray for the children, our children, to be safe, to be able to go to school and learn educational curriculum instead of indoctrination and DEI policies that are destroying not just their minds, not just their bodies, but their futures. The children, you picture your daughter growing up and meeting a nice young man, getting courted by him, getting married, raising a family, all that goes out the window. You think, so what? It's fine if my daughter comes home with a other nice young lady and gets married and has children. I'm not going to go on about that. But if you look at the statistics on how that works out, not just for the married same-sex couple, but for the children, it doesn't bode as well as you think. What we want are happy families that can raise more families. I'm not here to go on about adults' lifestyle. Adults can do what they want. We all have our vices. We all have our sins. I happen to recognize mine, and I'm willing to admit mine. But we have to start somewhere and say, yes, this is what I'm doing, and I know it's not morally correct, but I'm doing it. And, I'm not here to judge, especially adults, but when we thrust this information intentionally to indoctrinate our children to believe something as they grow up, so it's embedded in the deep recesses of their mind, there's nothing other than to call that other than grooming. And currently, our school system is grooming children. It's a rough word, a tough pill to swallow, but it's the truth. And we have to admit the truth, and we admit that we're grooming the children.
They all need to homeschool. Oh.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
Years ago, they made you think it was weird to do it? No, yeah, because they made,
They're normalizing it now.
oh yeah, it should have always been normal. It's the way it used to be.
That's right. Take care. God bless.
You know, and I have to imagine we all hang out in our own cliques and our own groups, and we think we have a robust opinion or thought process on the minds of our fellow community. And you know, we never really know, right? You don't know what's in other people's heads other than what they tell you or what you observe, and then you draw or infer from that. But most of the people I've talked to, and I don't just mean in my echo chambers, but people I talk to on the street, campaigning, out on social media, most people, whether they're vocal or not, agree, maybe not with all the things that I say and the animation that I use sometimes, but they agree with the message that we're sending from a place of love, that we want to protect the children and the children's innocence for as long as possible. Each and every child, their innocence should be protected. And of course, in a broken world, that doesn't happen with every child. But it doesn't mean we stop trying. Doesn't mean we stop trying to protect every child and inform. The trick is, and we're all learning how to inform the public and parents in a loving way, because just like you get frustrated with maybe hearing some of this information and you just want everyone to get along, and what's the big deal about a flag with different rainbow colors, and you know, it's no big deal to paint a crosswalk in this way. But those are tactics, Marxist tactics that are used. It's called kettling, right? We're just going to allow gay marriage between adults. And marriage, I mean, we can go into definitions, but marriage was supposed to be meant for something else. But now it's an economic bind, I guess, a merge between two people. And that's all the community wanted. That's all they're asking for. Just, you know, recognize us in that way. And they got that. But progressivism pushed and pushed more and said, well, it's now that we got that, that's normal. We want more. And if we go back, each and every one of us that's over 20 years old can go back in the Wayback Machine in our mind or the computer and know that what I'm saying is true. That's all they wanted. And when they got it, they needed to take another step forward, like police do, let's say in Ottawa or at Ambassador Bridge, pushing people one step at a time. It's just one step. What's the big deal? Just take one step back. Before you know it, you've been pushed back 100 meters, 200 meters. You have no more ground before the cliff edge. And that's where we're at right now. We're at a cliff's edge with our children. And we need to try to put a safety net up. And little or big, we are that safety net of parents, of concerned adults. So some adults might want to put on dresses or drag or sparkly little see-through pasties and read to children. We just simply want to get parents more involved with the curriculum, education, and the time their children are away from their care. While you're at work and you believe your children are being raised or educated in a wholesome, proper way, it's not the case anymore. So we need to first become aware, as much as it might hurt, that that's not the case. You don't have to believe everything that we say, but what you should do is say, holy cow, that is a lot of information you guys are saying that sounds so way out there. I can't believe that's happening. Good. Think that, take that little nugget of information of what you think is crazy and look it up. Look it up, preferably on some other site other than another search engine besides Google, because they'll procure their algorithm to put what we're saying on page 20 instead of anywhere on the first few pages. Brave, perhaps, would be a good search engine to use. And then look up what the DEI curriculum is. Look up on YouTube, if they don't censor it, some videos of parents speaking in America and Canada because they're the same programs. But look up what parents are saying at some of the board meetings or teacher conferences, parent-teacher conferences. They are spilling the tea and letting us know the books that are in the school libraries, pornographic cartoon books. And again, you can go to Action for Canada as well to see the books that are in schools. You can see what schools they're in. The problem is schools don't let parents in anymore without an appointment ever since COVID, right? For safety. And teachers are afraid to confirm this information, or I should say verify it with their own face and voice via social media or interviews, because they're afraid of being fired and jettisoned from their not only job, but their pension that they worked so hard for. So they stay silent. They stay complicit, which is something that we recognize with the COVID pandemic is many corporations, many businesses, many people were complicit for their own purposes, for their family. You know, they got to pay the mortgage, so they got to do what they got to do, whether they agree or not, and keep silent on their opinion. I don't think that's okay for anything, but I might be wrong when it comes to if that's okay for you and I. When it comes to the children, the innocent ones, it's not okay. It shouldn't be debatable. It's not okay that this is going on without parents' knowledge. And it's not okay that you parents out there are okay with not having full transparency on what's happening with your children's education. You should want to know. Even if you agree with everything, you should want to know. If your child is utilizing a pronoun and everyone's doing that for your child at school, and your child is building up confidence to want to have our taxpayer funded system mutilate, physically castrate, chemically and physically your child, that's what they're working up to. And it's going to be a bombshell when they come to you parents and say, hey, I've been identifying as Janet for the past 6 months or past year, and these are the steps I've taken, Dad, and tomorrow I have an appointment. It's not going to bode well for you, parent, because if you don't agree with it, it's going to be too late, at least for that moment. And if you do agree with it, you and your child, unfortunately, will be in for a lifetime of probably pain and turmoil, mental turmoil. Because copying things off of our perfect created body, God created us differently, but perfect. We all have our own, what we would call flaws. It doesn't necessarily mean they are flaws, but we all have our insecurities. But God made us that way. And we have to learn to love ourselves the way we were made and to go forth in the world and bring joy that way, not mutilate ourselves. So we look in the mirror 10 years later and we have physical problems from the operations that they committed. All right, guys, we're going to go around here and maybe talk to some people and see what they think about what's going on here, okay? Sure. Yeah, we're going to throw some of these here in the vehicle.
That's water. What do you want to do?
Maybe a little reminder while I'm throwing this in the truck here. Well, I guess we don't have it mirrored, but the Canadian Bill of Rights, since it's not mirrored, let me tell you something here. The Parliament of Canada affirming that the Canadian nation is founded upon principles that acknowledge the supremacy of God, the dignity and worth of the human person, and the position of the family in a society of free men and free institutions. And it goes on about freedoms for all of us. But if we don't know these things, if we've forgotten they even exist, or even worse, if we decide to say that we don't utilize these bills, well, then we don't have freedom. Then our laws, rules are arbitrary to the culture and times. And they can be changed. And just because you agree with it now doesn't mean they won't be changed to something you don't agree with later.
By permit only.
Yes, perfect.
Is that permit?
Yes. So
Good and stupid.
we have plenty of people that care, but where are you? Where are you, parents? Right? How are you doing?
How are you?
I'm well. Can I put you on camera?
By all means,
My name's Steve.
Steve,
Yeah.
conservative study.
So we're with the Truth Trumpet. What brings you here today?
Well, I am a journalist and I cover all types of political rallies and protests and those types of events.
Sure.
So I saw a flyer for this,
Yeah.
and came down from Toronto because I read the policy and was just interested to hear, what the delegates were going to say. I don't really know what aspect of it is up for debate today, but
Mm.
I got some of the concerns from the flyer, and so I'm interested in seeing how people are going to express themselves and what their issues are.
Absolutely. And what do you see as a reporter? I know try to stay neutral on sides, but as humans, we have our own opinions, beliefs. When it comes to the public education system and the DEI and critical race theory programs and policies that they've put in place, let's put that aside for a sec, right? What they consist of. But when you think of the education that our parents had, let's say, if they were here in this country, that our parents had in the public sector, there were things like civics and I took home ec. I remember I had home ec for a bit, right? We'd go to another school, do shop class. A lot of these have been eliminated, and there's only so much time in a day, right? In fact, they usually lower the amount of time that people are in school, 2:30, 2:45. Do you believe that there's time to remove some of the critical things that humans need to achieve success in life by replacing it with month-long pride events that incorporate sexuality into the children's education system in almost every category? Is that something that you think is potentially could work out positive by adding DEI policies and removing curriculum? Or do you think it might create a void in the children's future when it comes to success in the real world?
Sure. So that's a lot to take in. As far as the premise of the question, I don't have kids in this school board. So my finger isn't on the pulse of what's the actual curriculum like, what courses are being offered, not offered, so on and so forth. So that's a knowledge gap on my part. To answer your question kind of in a more broad sense, I am a believer that education is critical, and that, yes, there are certain skills that need to be honed, and that should be the primary focus.
Mhm.
I understand as well that the way that different teachers will approach a subject, like they will have their own way of doing it, and that will naturally encompass a little bit of a slant sometimes, or their own perspective, or whatever is shaping how they tackle it. So they're not mutually exclusive, I don't think. But as far as what's happening at the teacher college level, what is being prioritized or deprioritized, my general sense is that sex ed has a place, right? How far should that go? I am of the age where my parents had to sign like a consent form for me to take certain, and I was probably at the age of 11 or 12 or maybe even 13, right? So I don't know if that's still the case right now. What I've seen in my reporting is parents raising concerns that they're not being involved and feel shut out from participating. On the flip side, I'm also seeing parents take the position that this is natural progress and it should be welcomed. And there's a huge conflict there, right? A major impasse, and I don't know precisely how that gets resolved. One thing, kind of the human rights code applies, certainly in a school setting.
Right, to everybody.
To everybody. And there's no hierarchy of rights. So you can't favor some rights at the expense of other rights. And I think that's something that gets lost in conversation sometimes. There is no hierarchy of oppression.
Well, and sometimes I think we can agree that whether it be by accident or intentional, by uplifting one group, you're either leaving behind other groups or you're stepping on certain groups in order to elevate other groups instead of what I personally believe is trying to elevate all together under that guise of we all have equal rights. We all have the same rights.
Sure.
Each and every one of us, doesn't matter what we look like, our disparity. It doesn't matter. We're all in that category.
So my background, I'm actually a lawyer. So my legal training is kind of the perspective from which I approach this journalism stuff. And the charter, for example, does allow for, if there is a historically disadvantaged group, maybe something, is done differently vis-a-vis them that doesn't touch on other groups. But to your point, I am a believer that a rising tide lifts all boats. And so I don't know if that answers your question or even what the question is anymore. But it's about balancing. And I think that, again, there's no hierarchy of oppression, and you can't favor someone at the expense of someone else. And that's something that, educators really need to keep a keen eye on, because kids are vulnerable.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We better head in, or we might miss some of the meat and potatoes. Yes. Sorry, guys. I'm just loading up some things here. Bear with me. We'll be in the building in a moment. Oh, I dropped something. Okay. Here we go. Hopefully I didn't miss anything. Thank you.
Here you go.
Thank you. Burns. Through this door here. Up another set of stairs.
Not your first rodeo.
No, we've been here quite a few times, fortunately and unfortunately. Artwork. Okay. Getting nervous? What's up?
This is how goes Wesley Snipes tonight.
Laid.
No. You went to the,
Okay, so the meeting is going to start very shortly, guys. Bear with it. So,
Remind everyone that this is a business meeting of the board. All discussions and materials must be free of content which is contrary to the Ontario Human Rights Code and other laws of Ontario and Canada. All behavior must be courteous and respectful at all times. A person whose behavior disrupts the meeting or whose remarks are felt to be offensive or inappropriate will be called to order and given an immediate opportunity to withdraw the remarks. Refusal may result in eviction from the meeting. So I'm going to call this to order now. And I would like trustee Burgess to read the acknowledgement of traditional lands, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands owned by the Walking Treaty, agreements between the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Huron-Wendat peoples and the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ojibwe, the Adewa, Ottawa. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, youth, and needs.
Thank you, trustee Burgess. For attendance this evening, we have received regrets from trustee Cook. May I have approval of the agenda for tonight's meeting? Thank you, trustee Burgess.
The addendum T2 and T3.
Trustee Burgess, thank you. I wasn't gonna do it because there's only. No declarations of conflict of interest. Approval of the minutes. Supported with trustee Burgess, I support. All in favor. For delegations this evening, we have Beth St. Dennis, with student health, safety, and respect for the diversity of thought. We also have Selena Hamilton on parental involvement in student consent and exemption processes. And Jay Palco on trustee representation and due diligence. So we'll start this evening with Beth St. Dennis. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Beth St. Dennis. I am a parent, a godparent, a resident of Windsor, an English public school taxpayer, and an unapologetic Christian woman. I am here tonight to speak about the crucial importance of protecting the health, safety, and rights of all students, including those who may feel threatened or bullied when ideological views, particularly regarding LGBTQ matters, are pushed in a mandatory or intimidating manner within our schools. The Ontario Education Act is very clear in its purpose. Section 169.1(1)(a)(1) directs school boards to promote, quote, a positive school climate that is inclusive and accepting of all peoples, end quote. That list of protected characteristics includes creed, meaning religious or deeply held personal beliefs, alongside sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression. In other words, every student, regardless of what they believe, must be protected equally. Further, Section 301(1) of the Act defines bullying as behavior that, quote, causes or likely to cause harm, fear, or distress, end quote. It makes no distinction based on who the victim is or what beliefs they hold. When students are made to feel marginalized, shamed, or fearful because they quietly object or simply decline to celebrate an ideology being promoted, this too must be recognized and addressed as bullying. Your own Greater Essex County District School Board Safe Schools Policy P.014-2 reinforces this. It states that all schools must be, quote, safe, inclusive, and accepting environments where every student is respected, end quote. There is no asterisk excluding students whose personal beliefs do not align with dominant political or social narratives. Similarly, the Greater Essex County District School Board Equity and Inclusive Education Policy P.029-1 states the board's commitment to, quote, respecting and valuing diverse perspectives, lived experiences, and identities, and it requires fostering environments where individuals feel safe to express their beliefs. We must be very clear. Inclusion does not mean ideological agreement. Safety does not mean suppressing different worldviews. Equity does not mean only protecting certain groups. When LGBTQ issues are concerned, there must be a profound difference between teaching respect for all individuals, which we must absolutely do, and forcing ideological affirmation or participation. When students are required to engage in pride activities, when they are taught that their family's traditional or faith-based values are hateful or harmful, when they are fearful of speaking honestly because they risk being called names themselves, we have crossed a dangerous line. That is not inclusion, it is coercion. That is not safety, it is ideological bullying. Furthermore, the policy program memorandum number 119 issued by the Ministry of Education states that boards are directed to respect the charter rights of students, including freedoms of conscience and religion under Section 2A of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This means schools must not compel students to affirm beliefs that contradict their severely held religious or moral convictions. Doing so is not only wrong under your own policies, it may also violate fundamental constitutional rights. I respectfully urge the Policy and Bylaw Committee to reflect carefully on the legal and ethical obligations placed upon you to foster schools that are safe for all students, not just those who agree with particular ideologies, to protect students from any form of bullying, including ideological or social bullying, to uphold the charter values of freedom of belief and conscience, to ensure that respect for LGBTQ individuals never translates into compulsory affirmation or particular views on sexuality, gender, or identity, to make clear those opting out, respectful dissent, and freedom of belief are not forms of hate, they are protected rights. We can and must teach students to respect and coexist peacefully with everyone without forcing anyone to compromise who they are or what they believe. This is what true inclusion looks like. That is what a safe school climate really means. And this, trustees, is your duty under the Education Act, under your own Greater Essex County District School Board policies, and under the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? Clarification? No, thank you very much.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
No, thank you.
I can't ask you a
No.
question. This is my only opportunity to speak to any of you directly. I just really, it's a respectful question. May I ask?
I said no.
Hmm.
Our next speaker is Selena Hamilton. Go ahead, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, members of the Policy and Bylaw Committee. My name is Selena Hamilton, and tonight I'd like to address the parental involvement in student consent and exemption processes. I will begin by saying that I was pleased to read the following paragraph published in GECDSB Information Letter RAD 63, which is titled Exemption to Human Development and Sexual Health Appendix A. The GECDSB acknowledges that parents/guardians are the primary educators for their child/children. Insert school name is committed to partner with parents, guardians to provide the developmentally appropriate knowledge and skills students need to live healthy lives now and into the future. Family and parental values are an important and necessary component to human development and sexual health, and students will always be referred to you for important discussions on the values surrounding some topics. If parents/guardians choose to exempt their child from the expectations found in Strand D of the Ontario Curriculum, Health and Physical Education 2019, please contact the school for the exemption form. Every word in that statement reflects what our group has been advocating to the board since 2022. While I would like to say our work is done, the acknowledgement just read does not truly represent the standard operating practices we see today. Recent initiatives by the Policy and Bylaw Committee have introduced highly controversial changes to the school environment, ones that not only conflict with self-declared beliefs of 55% of students, but also create unsafe conditions in washrooms and change rooms, increasing the risk of bullying and assault. Where is the parental exemption form for this? GECDSB regulation number RAD 53, which addresses student exemptions from participating in school opening and closing exercises, cites Ontario Regulation 435/00, quote, in the case of a pupil who is less than 18 years old, if the pupil's parent or guardian applies to the principal to be exempted from doing so. 18 years old is the provincial standard for parental authority over their children in the school environment. Ontario Policy Program Memorandum Number 59, titled Psychological Testing and Assessment of Pupils, states in paragraph 1A, before any psychological assessment is undertaken, the pupil, if he or she is an adult, or a parent or guardian if the pupil is a minor, must be informed of the purpose, nature, and possible implications of the procedures, and must provide prior written consent for such assessment based on information provided. Once again, a parent must not only be informed, but must also provide written consent for any testing and assessment their child undergoes. This includes any assessment for an accommodation plan, even if requested by the student. Washrooms and changing rooms are spaces where privacy is expected, and safety is even more critical due to the inherent vulnerability that comes with a state of undress. Any modifications to this environment that increase the risk of voyeurism, bullying, or assault should not only require parental consent, but also allow for a formal written exemption. A single-use washroom is an inadequate solution. Expecting hundreds of students to wait in line for access to a single toilet is simply unrealistic. Public consultation is by no means a method of garnering parental consent, especially when only 400 responses were received and there are over 32,000 students enrolled in Greater Essex County. Parents invest in and enroll their children in the public school system with the expectation that a duty of care will be upheld in every corner of school grounds. OPSPA's Guide to Good Governance 2018 to 2022 says in Chapter 4, a school board and its employees or volunteers are expected to provide the same standard of care for students as would be provided by a reasonably careful or prudent parent in the circumstances. This is commonly referred to as reasonably prudent parent doctrine. The duty of care is to protect the students from all reasonably foreseeable risks of harm. Which parent in this gallery or watching remotely would knowingly place their daughter in a washroom with a male schoolmate? Who would permit their female child to shower or change clothes in the presence of male classmates? What parent would risk their daughter's safety by allowing her to compete against larger male peers where the possibility of lasting physical harm is real? If you're looking for a concrete answer, refer to the informed consent forms outlined in GECDSB Regulation RPR1. Paragraph 37 of this regulation ensures that parents fully understand the inherent risk before signing their consent. If such a standard of care is required for visits to local museums and landmarks, shouldn't even greater precautions be taken to safeguard physical and sexual safety? In closing, parents are the primary caregivers and educators for their children, and if this committee intends to proceed with fundamental changes to the facilities, which are currently designated by sex, it is essential to provide a pathway for parental consent or exemption for 32,000 students in your care. Thank you. We have a question for clarification.
Thank you. In your prepared notes, you referred to this is what our group has been trying to do since
2022.
and who's your group?
This is my group.
And who is your group?
Church family, Harvest Church, Riverside Baptist, Lakeshore, St. Andrews, Campbell Baptist,
And Freedom.
North Shore.
So.
North Shore. North Shore.
Orthodox.
Thousand churches I've been to. So when you say your group, you're saying specific members. You're not speaking on behalf of the doctrine of all those church members.
I'm not speaking of a registered group now.
No, so it's individual members collectively from the churches that you mentioned.
The body of Christ.
Yeah.
Concerned residents.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that answer.
Retired teachers.
Next up is
Body of Christ, go ahead. Mhm.
your time has begun.
Good evening, all. I'm Jeremy Pelko. I'll be speaking on trustee representation and due diligence. As a result of advocating for parents, children, and good education, here is one question that begs to be asked. Is this committee and board acting judiciously, independent in their representation, or are illegitimate forces driving them to be misaligned with or against the Education Act, Good Governance Guide, Ontario Human Rights Code, Parental Responsibility Act, Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and Criminal Code of Canada? I'm convinced certain trustees are bowing to ideologies and agendas, not honoring the letter and or spirit of laws, that they are not honoring parents, people of faith, concerned citizens, and children who are minors and cannot consent. That's why they have parents. You can't disregard and disrespect parents and constituents while claiming to be acting in good faith and conduct as trustees. That is a completely untenable position. Each trustee must exercise due diligence to prove the board and its committees are operating according to their mandate, applicable laws, and good sense while genuinely considering public feedback. Acknowledging that this is a public school board and not a private school board with special interests. And identifying, assessing, and mitigating all threats and all risks. Instead, we hear words like rare, hypothetical, and monolithic to try to justify wrongful actions. Being rare in occurrence doesn't justify an action, as any dutiful police officer would agree. If one student a year is physically or sexually assaulted in a bathroom, that I believe would qualify as rare. But is it acceptable to this board? I surely hope not. Nor should it be acceptable, rare or not, to cause interference with the parent-child relationship that violates parental authority and endangers the child. Using hypothetical to marginalize the serious concern of ensuring all staff won't abuse a secret-keeping regulation is a dismissive attempt to circumvent doing the work to get the job done right. I have shared with you headline articles of real-world examples of what happens when children are told they may be born in the wrong body, to keep secrets from their parents, or must share private spaces and competitive sports with the opposite sex. This board needs to heed these warnings and act wisely to not be the next such headline. Now, about claiming religious groups are not monolithic. This is at best misleading and demonstrates a lack of understanding. A quick check on the tenets of the Christian, Catholic, Jewish, Islam, and Sikh religions will clarify that these believe children are born in the right body, that we are made male and female with unique roles in family and society. For the Christian, the Bible is clear, Genesis 1:27. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. The over 50% people of faith demographic in your student census report are indeed monolithic if they truly follow their professed religion. Conversely, the less than 50% are not monolithic, such that many of those oppose gender dysphoria being driven into the mind and heart of a child. Allow me to explain allegorically. Perhaps you heard the stories of daredevils going over Niagara Falls in a barrel. This stunt was made illegal in 1951 after the death of one such daredevil. It seems obvious to us now, but they learned the hard way that this activity was lethal and ruined the lives of daredevils and their loved ones, while traumatizing witnesses of the horror of these failures. Children are not to be treated as daredevils, coerced or manipulated into a barrel of wokeism and sent over the falls of depraved policies and regulations. This is indeed risking their lives with lies and by robbing parents of their authority and leadership over their own children. Perhaps this example will further clarify and give perspective. If a child causes mischief or breaks the law, the police don't go to trustees, administration, or staff to answer for the child. They go to the parents who are responsible for whatever the child may take, damage, or destroy. So, why, I ask, on God's green earth, are you bypassing parents on sensitive subjects and issues that directly affect the physical and sexual well-being of the child? Now is the time for this committee and board to course correct. What you do next will reveal your true nature and intentions. May God help us stop the proliferation of gender identity depravity in our schools and shift the focus to upholding public confidence and ensuring student achievement, which cannot be done if children are led astray and hindered in finding who God created them to be.
Go ahead, Burgess.
Thank you.
We're at staff reports, we have none. For our new business, this evening, we have the recommendation that policy and recommend to the board that policy and regulation naming and renaming of the facilities be approved. Do I have support? Trustee Burgess?
I would move it, Madam Chair, and, colleague has brought forward, amendment to be considered for this, policy. So, there's a strong rationale, but basically I sent out the a little heads up, not much of but, there are three amendments, and then there's three parts to it. It's basically to make sure that, the naming and meeting, maybe once it's formed, yes, a preliminary, as a bonding exercise to make sure that they can actually free the brainstorm, not bring the cost. So, this is what it does, if I could read it. So to be added under the committee meetings on page 5 of 7 of the regulations, directly before the item 3.2. The time is- Okay. Yeah, just before 3.2. Yeah. At the first meeting of the meeting, all committee members are required to complete and participate in a mandatory training session on unconscious bias, provided or facilitated by the board. This training supports the committee in objectively reviewing community input and proposed names by raising awareness of implicit and unconscious bias. This helps to ensure recommendations reflect the board's core commitments to justice and diversity, equity, and inclusion, and is consistent with the board's established criteria and values. Any member of the committee that does not participate in the training session will be eligible to serve on the naming committee and be part of the process. So that makes sure that the board that is all everything. And then under committee meetings, current item number 3 went on page 5 of 7 to be revised. So that you'll see the section there that says the purpose of the first meeting will be, and ends with a list of potential names will be created. And then it says to add the words of the various potential names. And then in appendix C.
Turn the volume up.
Which has all the script of the chair. There's an acknowledgement of the chair of the naming committee.
This is land acknowledgement. We didn't do a chair acknowledgement.
We're utilizing unconscious bias training provided to the set aside personal biases and preferences. Our goal is to objectively help determine the names which we feel as a committee will create a strong identity for the school community and represent the character of the brand to greater success. So it's to insert those personalized and unconscious bias training provided to reflect on and set, and then our goal is to. I will put that amendment on the floor. Have an objection or and from administration.
Some clarification is going to be first.
Yeah.
Unconscious bias provided or facilitated by some part.
Yeah.
So that will be.
Small, small.
Okay.
Yeah.
There is nobody who's an employer who is qualified to. When we provide it to, for example, our teams, they participate in that. So if we're saying that, administration.
So what I would.
This conversation is unconscious.
something that you go through. Completed training with questions afterwards to at least have exposure to, because yeah, I think the idea was really that prior to the meeting and working together, people would understand that what true to make that attempt to be with somebody that they can bring some.
I'm sure I'm clear about what the purpose of it is. So it's clear that it's not the board, small people, or administration providing the training. We will need to hire somebody to and to create the module. I want to be very clear and transparent about that. And it needs to be revised. And for that every
Well,
just want to make sure that it's clear.
Discussion. It doesn't provide or facilitated. So I'm thinking that's open enough that if there's something that's already kind of off the shelf available. Well, I don't. That's what that part of it is.
Application, there is nothing specifically to interview procedures for people who are on interview panels to not bring their bias to interviews. Having unconscious bias in school naming, having unconscious bias in policy development, having unconscious bias is very different. So it would need to be separate.
So, I still support it. For example, if we have a meeting that we brought in several guests to walk out the committee, but that offered a perspective so that, meeting its members to get, fuller understanding of what baggage something from.
So to sum it up, we're gonna pay for a committee, a new committee to be trained in wokeism. And we'll carry that forward like that's the word of God. And that's the moral standard. And if you go against it clearly, as they made a module that you're going against, you're in the wrong. And we're paying for it.
Should reflect the entire community, so I think it's important. I really think it's important to have some sort of training session for conscious. So I still support it, and I think provided with the facility, I'm hoping that's simple, be done once and.
You're talking about unconscious bias, and the word simple should be in the same sense. It's the unconscious.
Certainly, in our regulation, the appendix, we have, the list of all the different schools and some commentary on that, so I think it's good.
Well, I don't support any part of this moving forward. And if we can all certainly put it on hold till we hear from Trustee Cook. But we would have to wait for another policy meeting for it to go through. So I would just say, right now, I'm not support. I don't support it.
All those in favor?
Okay, with that, we're going to move on to J. Motions for consideration introduced at previous meeting. Recommendation that policy and bylaw committee deliberate on bylaw revision to include an item of notice and present questions to be included in the draft agenda or regular agenda of the GECDSB board and standing committees. Trustee Burgess, did you want to speak on this? Which of the two of it first?
I move it, I'll speak to.
When there's two of us.
I know, but I'm just want to make sure. So I want to make sure that we understand what this is. This is a notice, it's not list of questions, it's a notice of trustee questions. So presently in our new bylaws, we have a mechanism that the chair and the director or the chair I suppose, of the committee and the director, you know, have a pre-agenda meeting and look at things and make a determination. There's not an appeal process in that, but there are questions that come about that aren't of a particular question that is maybe only a clarification. And over the years, I've seen different approaches to this. So if I had a question, I needed something clarified, I could at one point call or speak to somebody informally just to get some information. And increasingly, we're encouraged or not encouraged to give questions to somebody who doesn't have it either in their portfolio, or that it should be a superintendent or it shouldn't be a superintendent, or it should be the director, it should be the chair of the committee or chair of the board. And I think that with new bylaws, I think we have to make it really clear, you know, who we ask those questions of for our own personal clarification. But on the other hand, we also have questions that sometimes are not questions of something where it's just clarification. It might be an emergent issue. It might be something that we see that that's against, that we don't know whether whether anybody's working on it necessarily, or has noticed it, or that it's coming up on a cyclical measure. I always think back to the student who came forward with the, you know, we kind of knew that we didn't know it wasn't a provincial thing, it wasn't in a procedural, you know, thing. The health unit had a little bit on it, but with students, for example, through I think the speaker's supposed to maybe a delegation. That's a different thing. But if you have a question that actually is the answer would edify the entire board, not the individual trustee, or it's a question arising from bringing concerns of the public, which is our duty as a school board member, to the notice of the board, I think it's important to do so. I would say first at standing committees, because that's where the robust discussion can happen, and then depending on how the question is answered, it's there for everybody to see. It may not need to be answered or asked again at a regular board meeting, but to have the notice of trustee question, it gives the opportunity still for the agenda setters to vet it, see if it's necessary, see if it's a system answer rather than just an individual trustee who needs to have an answer on something procedural or, you know, more trivial, for example, or just a real notification. So I hope you can support it. I think that if as long as it's a notice, I think it won't be abused and be too lengthy. And I think that it gives us an opportunity to bring concerns of the public that may not be on the front burner that we think that or might be the only thing I have a little caveat about this is to get this notice here is a form. So that's not exactly, you know, expeditious, but again, it's at the will of who's ever resident, whatever the next meeting is available. So possibly if it's something that is deemed more urgent, it can jump to whatever the most appropriate committee or a regular board and have it on as a question that has been given notice on an agenda, and then the subsequent meeting wherever it is.
So I'll call the question in support. Trustee Burgess. I'm just gonna quickly say that I don't support it only because there's never been an instance that I've had a question that I couldn't make a phone call or send an email and get an answer to. It never had to be on any agenda of any type. I could instantly get one, so I don't see where this fits in, that you would have questions that you would need to ask at a meeting, because I find our administration very easy to be available to us, and they will, if we haven't directed it to the right person, they will. They'll give it to you and they'll direct you, rather than having it go into a meeting and then you're sent someplace else. That's my reasoning for that. I look forward to what the board comes and says, because I want to know where they stand. Thank you very much.
Okay, so you've already taken a vote, but you've spoken after the vote.
I just didn't explain to you why
So we've taken the vote, but since this committee, I just want to say that it's not about questions, but it's just for you. So when I'm getting questions just for me, I don't necessarily share it with the entire board. This is clarification, just for you. I'm saying something that affects the person. I'm gonna say that.
This is our school board, guys.
we have no, motions, we have no announcements. And with that, I'm going to announce the adjournment.
Put our tax together. One in the middle, the one that said no.
Kidding me? You know exactly what they have in their heart, which is like, very.
Lost people can be found.
Tax dollars. Not the guy. No, the police.
You guys turn your volume up so we can hear better. Is that Matt Walsh on the shirt there? It probably is.
Do the work.
Well, do the work, yeah.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
Oh, wow.
I don't know if the camera caught what the trustees were saying and speaking up there. The microphones they weren't speaking into the microphones very well. To sum it up, they have concepts like unbiased committees. To make an unbiased committee to look at unbiased or unconscious thought. And of course, they bickered amongst themselves and shot it down. It was a waste of time, pretty much. But when you hear me speak, or you hear some of the better, well-spoken people that were speaking today, the three speakers, you expect a certain level of professionalism, not from me, just a regular guy, but you expect some level of decorum or professionalism when they're speaking on this type of platform as a trustee with one another, voting on policies, referendums even that are going to affect our children's future. And whether you heard their words or not, or you saw the way they were talking there, it sounded like high school kids at a pizza party talking about what they're going to be doing, getting ready for prom. I can't believe how our tax dollars are being spent, and the people that are in charge right now. You don't have to agree with me, and you don't have to think that I'm well-spoken. I don't think I'm well-spoken. But there are clearly people who are much more knowledgeable, whether they be parents or concerned citizens of this community, that could, should, and with your help, will do a much better job in the committee seats as trustees than these folks that have gotten too used to the cushy chair they're sitting in, talking about unconscious bias and how to solve the unconscious bias that people have. First, they should work on what's happening in the conscious world. Help solve what's happening right here while we're all awake and conscious of what we're doing. Once you get that wrangled in, then perhaps you can work on the psyche of the unconscious bias. But to even discuss this right now, exactly. What are we even talking about after we heard poignant information and questions and comments. And if you noticed when Beth, Jeremy, and Selena were speaking, they were drawing directly from the policy handbook and I don't know if it's called the charter that school board uses,
Education Act,
the Education Act.
Greater Essex County District School Board policies,
So,
and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
which we should all know that by now, but our speakers are drawing right from these documents, the documents that they're functioning off of. And up until recently, we have been shut down for making these comments, drawing off of the inaccuracies and inconsistencies within their own policies that they're drawing from and arbitrarily utilizing it, as in uplifting certain groups of people. And whether they know it or not, by uplifting some groups, they're pushing down other groups. They're suppressing other groups. If you give the person with the rainbow colored flag a lollipop for showing their pride, but you don't give everybody a lollipop, well, whether you meant it or not, and here you go, trustees, this is an unconscious bias. Whether you meant it or not, that white male child who didn't do anything wrong doesn't disparage any other classmate, but they don't get the lollipop because they're not wearing the colors that you're promoting that month or that you're trying to push. That's an unconscious bias. No. Now they've dismissed this meeting. Is it over or yeah? So they've come up with all the answers and solved the problems of the public school sector now. But as you heard, right, the problem with some of these committees, they talk about it takes 4 months to get to the point of where they vote. And then there's 3 people up there voting because other trustees don't show up or can't come or are too busy to come to their job.
Or maybe they just didn't want to hear the specific speakers that were on the agenda.
Right now, Beth, I happen to think that is the most accurate portrayal, but we don't know. We don't know what's in their minds, right? For all we know, they'll have the kind of leftist story of how they were on their way here and they got stopped in the rain with flat tire and then a mountain bear / lion attacked them. And as they were trying so desperately to get here, they fended off that bear. You know, I'm just going off on a tangent, but we don't know what's going on in their minds, but they're not here today doing their job, right? They all should be voting on this. How can you have 3 people, an odd number,
There's
small?
only 2. The education director doesn't count.
Even worse. So 2 people, right? That's why the third lady on the end was not partaking, just I think note taking or taking the minutes of the meeting. So having said that, nothing got resolved today, but hopefully you, parents and concerned citizens, got a little slice of information from our side, because I'm sure you can hear the mic from our speakers, pointing out the inadequacies and inconsistent policies that our school boards are utilizing and arbitrarily using while trying to maintain themselves on a false platform of virtue. We're going to keep holding their feet to the fire and holding them accountable. We're going to keep working on ourselves and holding ourselves more accountable so we refine ourselves to be better in this room and to not just bring the proper information to you, but to also soften our hearts because they're lost and we want them to be found, right? They're not enemies. We don't want them to be our enemies. We want our children. That's the goal. We want our children and your children to prosper and to not be damaged physically or mentally in that public sector of the process of upbringing them. So with your help, with your prayers, please join us in the future at these meetings and walks, and we can move mountains and we can help our children live an innocent childhood. Thank you.